Sup y'all, it's me, it's your boy Mr. D, back at it again, this time with a comma video. I'm not doing much of the heavy lifting here. I'm using a PowerPoint that is given to you by the Purdue Online Writing Lab. They made this presentation for comma usage, so I'm just going to kind of walk you through it, explain where they're coming from for some of these slides. So they start out by saying, what is a comma? We all know it's a punctuation mark that connects parts of a sentence. We got it. But there is some important vocabulary you need to build for the rest of our discussion that you may already be familiar with, and if you are, fantastic, skip ahead to the next slides. But if you aren't, just know that we're going to be using the terms independent and dependent clauses, and that's talking about parts of a sentence that have a subject and a verb. Now, you tend to think of a subject and a verb as something that, is necessary for a sentence, but, well, it is. But it is not the only thing that's necessary for a sentence, because a dependent clause can have a subject and a verb and not be a sentence. So like, here's an example of a dependent clause: because we went to the movies. That is not a complete sentence. We're going to talk more about the distinction between independent and dependent clauses, but just know they both have subjects and verbs. It's just about whether they can stand by themselves, hence be independent, or need something else, hence dependent. The names really do make sense when you think about it. And what if we don't have a subject and a verb? Then we're talking about something like a phrase. Classic example would be a prepositional phrase, like under the house. That has a noun, the house, but it doesn't have a subject. It has to connect to a clause. So let's talk about the big boys first, independent clauses, okay? If you have a subject and a verb and it forms a complete thought, you have an independent clause. Here we have the subject, the couple, the verb, dances. Full thought, full sentence, independent clause, can stand by itself, doesn't need anything else. A compound sentence would be a sentence that has two independent clauses. But this is just how grammar works. You have to have something to connect these two independent clauses. There's multiple options, but one of the most common options is what we call a coordinating conjunction. This makes a lot of sense. Again, sounds like maybe some big words, but conjunction literally means to bring two things together. So this is something that coordinates two things that could be independent, but are now going to come together. So we join words, phrases, and clauses together in a sentence. Here, I don't like that they gave the definition of a conjunction after using the phrase coordinating conjunction, because coordinating conjunction is a very specific type of conjunction. It merges two independent clauses only. Okay? So take a look at this. For, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. There's literally only 7 coordinating conjunctions. This isn't like a limited example list. This is all of them. So if you remember fanboys, you can remember them all. But really, the goal of this presentation is to get you to feel natural with this stuff. You will just, after practicing and practicing, know that any of these words are coordinating conjunctions, but you won't think, oh my God, that's a coordinating conjunction. You'll just know. So take a look at this compound sentence, okay? Andy built a snowman. We've got one independent clause over here. In fact, it would be an independent clause if it was just Andy built. Same thing over here. Jeff played, that's an independent clause, and we've got a prepositional phrase here, an additional phrase here. But we've got two independent clauses. So the comma in a compound sentence, when you have two independent clauses, is placed before the coordinating conjunction. So here we have our multiple options. Remember, we have for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. And those all have different relationships between the independent clauses. Okay? And is our coordinating conjunction we chose here, so we're going to put our comma before it right here. I think that you can immediately see how a different coordinating conjunction creates a different meaning in the sentence. For example, if we chose something like so, Andy built a snowman, comma, so Jeff played with his dog, that would imply there's like some causal relationship between these two actions, whereas and is pretty much just these two things both occurred. Okay? But regardless of which one you pick, you put the comma before the coordinating conjunction when you're working with two independent clauses. Okay? Let's see, sorry. So, little test here, where would you place the comma in the following sentence? Dan struggled with his homework, so his father helped him. Well, you can immediately identify we've got two independent clauses. We've probably, therefore, got a coordinating conjunction. There it is. So, and we know it goes before, so it would be right after homework here. Now, what if we're not working with two independent clauses? What if we're working with a dependent clause? Remember, the example was because we went to the movies, right? That cannot stand independently. That would not be a full sentence. There are a lot of markers that are dead giveaways for a dependent clause. Stuff like because, like I used in my example, or since, when, while, until, if, as, though, although, unless, after, before, once, whether. These are all signs that you're going to be working with a dependent clause. They all make it so that a sentence cannot stand by itself. That makes a ton of sense because all of these words are indicating a relationship with something else. Okay? Therefore, they need that other part to be complete. All right? It's like a peanut butter and jelly. You're not just going to eat a jelly sandwich, all right? Okay, maybe you do, but the police should arrest you. You need both, okay? Dependent phrases and clauses help clarify and add detail. Yep. They can appear at beginning, middle, or end. Why is that being pointed out? Because that will affect where the comma is, okay? So where you put your dependent clause changes where the comma goes, okay? So when a dependent clause is placed at the beginning of a sentence, you place the comma between the independent clause and the dependent clause. Take a look at the example. Before he took the test, dependent clause, comma, Dan struggled with his homework. Now, they decide to get really fancy and make this a compound sentence as well. Dan struggled with his homework, comma, so his father helped him. So we've got one dependent clause and two independent clauses connected by a coordinating conjunction. Okay? And technically, yeah, this is a subordinating conjunction, but we don't need to get into that. Okay? Point being, if the dependent clause comes first, if the clause which is giving additional information, like though, unless, before, when, comes at the beginning, you have to separate it from the independent clause with a comma. So an example here should be pretty easy based on what we just talked about. Because it was raining, there's my marker of a dependent clause. I know that this is dependent clause. We decide to go to the movies. We know that we need to connect these with a comma. Because it was raining, comma, we decide to go to the movies. Oh, and there we go. Got the, they call it an introductory clause. Okay, yeah, because it's at the start. It's an introductory clause is a dependent clause at the start of a sentence, but just keep it simple. This is a dependent clause at the start of the sentence, so we're going to put a comma. So what happens when a dependent clause is located after an independent clause? We do not put a comma. And this should be very intuitive, especially with the connector because. We use because all the time, and you know there's not a comma here. We decided to go to the movies because we were bored. Okay? So when we use, and that applies to any of these dependent clause markers, right? Let's come up with a different example that doesn't use because. We decided to go to the movies although it was raining. Right? No comma there. So just easy. So now we're going to talk about a different question than independent-dependent clauses, which is like definitely responsible for a lot of comma mistakes. Here is another kind of topic. So I'm kind of, let's say this is topic 2, which is, let's say we're not, connecting independent-dependent clauses. What if we're just trying to give additional information in a sentence? Well, this PowerPoint is going to draw that distinction between information which is essential and information which is not essential. And their definition of that is that an essential clause is critical to the meaning of the sentence. That's a decent way to think about it. An essential clause or essential phrase, you cannot take it out and have it mean the same thing. So take a look at this example. The people who work in my office are loud. Of course, if we take out this essential phrase, we have the people are loud, which is an independent clause. It is a full and complete thought. However, we don't get the same meaning from the people are loud that we would get from the people who work in my office are loud. And in that sense, it is essential to the meaning of the phrase. So it's important to understand here, essential to the meaning of the sentence. It's important to understand here that we're not defining essential as necessary to be grammatically correct. It's necessary to mean the same thing. right? If I just say the people are loud, we have no indication that we're talking about the people I work with. It's just people, right? So a tip here is that the word that is almost always an indicator of an essential phrase or clause. It's almost always indicating more information. The tiramisu that I had at Joe's was great, okay? So whenever you see that, you should, especially in the middle of a sentence, you should be thinking that's probably an essential phrase, okay? Now, of course, the contrast with that is a non-essential clause or phrase. It does add additional information, but removing it could keep the meaning of the sentence relatively the same. Now, this is always a judgment call, right? This is why commas can get messy, because, I mean, what do you mean the meaning's the same? Well, it's a judgment call. Take a look at the example. My brother, who lives across town, plans to throw a party. Let's take out the non-essential phrase. We've got an independent clause. My brother plans to throw a party. Now, is it crucial to my brother plans to throw a party that he lives across town? Not really. I mean, maybe if this sentence is like really about, like sometimes in English, like I'm going to push back on the PowerPoint a little bit and like just mess with their example a little bit. You know, sometimes in English we use non-essential phrases to subtly imply some other meaning. Like, let's say I'm trying to tell my friend that I'm not going to go to my brother's party, right? But I don't want to just say I'm not going to go to my brother's party. I might say something like, my brother, who lives across town, plans to throw a party. If I took that out, you would miss the implication of what I'm saying. But that's a pretty fringe circumstance, right? That's usually in spoken language when we use those subtexts or clues from non-essential language. When we're writing, we really should be clear about what we mean. And if we just take this literally as it means, throwing a party is not necessarily connected to where you live. So when you have a non-essential phrase, we use commas to offset that. One at the end of the previous word and then one at the end of the phrase. Okay. So additionally, we can have these non-essential clauses placed in ways that are not like in the middle where we offset them, but perhaps at the end of a sentence. Like Steve said he would propose to me on Valentine's Day, which is my favorite holiday. Right? Not necessarily critical to this proposal question. So let's do a little check. You can pause the video, take a look at these examples, and see how you would react. Where would you place commas if necessary? All right, hopefully you have already paused the video, come up with your answers. So let's go over these examples. I am planning a trip to Paris, which is one of the greatest cities in the world. Is the fact that Paris is great essential to the fact that you're planning a trip to Paris? No, it's kind of just throwing in additional information. So you would want a comma after Paris before which. Okay. The place that I would most like to see is the Eiffel Tower. Yeah, here, that word that, which was a clue here, that is almost always an indicator of an essential phrase or clause, is giving essential information. Because if we take out the phrase that I would most like to see, then all we have is the place is the Eiffel Tower. What place? The place where I left a baguette. The place where my parents first met. I don't know. We need that I would most like to see. Then we have Pierre, who is one of my business contacts, will meet me at the airport. I would keep that the same. Who is one of my business contacts? It's like relevant information, but it's not essential information. I think that's another distinction to draw in your head between relevant and essential. Yeah, like probably it matters that Pierre is one of his business contacts. He's probably there on a business trip, but it's not essential. So it goes in offset commas. Last thing, which is usually not a problem for many of my students, is using commas to make a list. Here they have the comma before the conjunction is generally required, but it can be omitted if there's no possibility of confusion. Yeah, you should definitely put it before the conjunction, okay? And I'll show you an example in a second. Consider the difference in the following. Last month, Alex dated Marianne Lee and Kim. So there's a question down here. How many women did Alex date? Let's take a look at the first one and answer that question. Last month, Alex dated Marianne, Lee, and Kim. He dated 2 women, right? Let's check the second example. Last month, Alex dated Mary, Ann, Lee, and Kim. Okay, now he's dating 1, 2, 3, 4 ladies. Okay, and then last month, Alex dated Mary Ann, Lee, and Kim. Okay, now he's dating 3. So, comma listing, very important. Okay, let's see. Commas should be placed in a series of words, phrases, or clauses. Martina brushed her hair, put on her pajamas, and went to bed. So we have a comma here, comma here. Now we've got 1, 2, and 3 actions. She fell asleep and dreamed that she was a princess. She kissed a frog, and she rescued her prince. She fell asleep, comma, and dreamed that she was a princess. There should be like a semicolon here. I don't like this example. She kissed a frog, and she rescued her prince. Okay. Use commas to separate adjectives to provide equal description of a noun. Can you put and between the adjectives? Can they be described in reverse order? If yes, use a comma. So the big blue house. Could you say the blue big house? I guess they say no. Same thing with 3 hungry kittens. It just doesn't sound right if you say the blue big house or the hungry 3 kittens. But here, a cranky bald man seems like he can switch. This is... Don't worry about this one. This really doesn't come up that much. Comma splice comes up all the time, which is when students try to join 2 independent clauses with a comma. Right? They've been studying their dependent clauses, and they're like, oh man, if I'm giving additional information, I definitely got to have a dependent clause and therefore have a comma, or no. But remember, way back at the start of this video, we talked about coordinating conjunctions as helping us put 2 independent clauses together, right? So a comma splice is basically when you put the comma, but you don't put the coordinating conjunction, okay? So Dan struggled with his homework, comma, his father helped him. That's a comma splice. Right here, we would want one of our 7 fanboys, right? For, and, nor, but, or, yet, or so. Okay. So that's our first option to correct a comma splice. They picked so, the S of fanboys, because there's kind of a causal relationship between these 2 independent clauses. Or, this is one of my favorites, just start a new sentence. Dan struggled with his homework. Period. His father helped him. Period. Because remember, an independent clause has everything it needs to do to be a complete thought and be a sentence. So you can always just separate with a period. And then, if you want a really fancy option, you can use a semicolon, which functionally operates as a period when it has an independent clause on both sides. But the rule for semicolons is, remember, always an independent clause on both sides, as if it were a period. Okay, so let's take a little test here, get all these concepts working together, pause the video, try to fix each of these sentences if they need correction, and then unpause in a sec. Okay, let's take a look at number 1. This semester I am taking calculus, physics, and economics. So, this semester I am taking, do we need a comma right here? This semester. It's not this semester I am taking. So I think we need this semester, comma, I am taking calculus, comma, physics, comma, and economics. Okay. Calculus is my best subject. I am certain I will get an A. So we have an independent clause, an independent clause. Oh, that's a classic comma splice. So we just go back here. What are our 3 options? We can pick a conjunction. We can start a new sentence, or we can use a semicolon right here. Although I am very busy, I still find time to have fun. All right, we have a dependent clause here. Although I am very busy. I'm pretty sure although was on our list of dependent clause markers. There it is, although. Okay, so let's get back here. Although I'm very busy, comma, I still find time to have fun. The dependent clause is at the start, so that is A-OK, happy, fun time. Last weekend, my brother visited me, and we went to a football game, a party, and a rock concert. All right. So we need last weekend, comma, my brother visited me, comma, and we went to a football game, comma, a party, comma, and a rock concert. I'm not sure we need a comma here because the coordinating conjunction, yeah, we do. Comma here, and then we have our little list here. All right, if you want more info on comma use, you can definitely check out the online writing lab. There are additional rules other than the ones I talked to you about, but let's just zoom out for a second and talk about big takeaways here. Number one, you should be familiar with the language of independent and dependent clauses and what happens when they are in relationship with each other, be it independent and independent, independent and dependent, when it comes to commas. The other vocabulary I hope you're comfortable with is the essential versus non-essential clause distinction, and when to offset information in commas. All right. Thanks for watching. I hope this has been helpful. And remember, the goal is not to read or think about every sentence you write through the lens of this like arcane vocabulary of grammar, but just to practice enough that you don't have to think about it at all, which I hope you can all reach. And I know if you work hard, you can. All right, take it easy.